You're listening to the Bulldog Hour, getting you inside the Wilson football program with weekly game previews, recaps, highlights, and interviews. Now, here are your hosts, Joe Mays and Justin Raffauf.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the third episode of the second season of the Bulldog Hour. I am one of your hosts, Joe Mays, and sitting next to me, my co-host, Justin Raffauf.
Yeah, it's good to be back. Well, the season is underway, and it's given us plenty to talk about at the start of the season here. So we're excited to get another episode done, and like I said, lots to talk about.
Yeah, we're really pleased with the way the shows have gone so far. We started work on the second season back in May, really got things going in June and July with all the interviews. We put out a preseason show, actually 2 of them, and here we are in the third episode, and we realized last year we only did 4 for the entire length of the season. We're probably going to more than double that this year. We're hoping to get 7, 8, maybe even 9 episodes, depending on how things shake out once the playoffs roll around. And we're really excited that after our third episode this time, we still don't have to do one where we're really, downtrodden, somber, and disappointed because, well, hey, we're not doing this after a loss. We talked about before this show started that last year, before 2 of the 4 episodes we did were coming off of a loss.
And one of the other episodes was before the season started.
Right.
So of the 3 in-season episodes, 2 were after losses.
Yeah, so it was kind of tough for us to come on here and, and be happy and upbeat about things because, early in the season, a loss is a loss. They happen. Right. It was to an incredible team in Central Dauphin who went to the district final last year. But you want to be coming off of, a high point and doing the show here 2 days removed from the week 2 game against Springford. It's pretty high up there. Because, Wilson won, and we'll get to that in just a few moments, but it's nice to be talking and be so upbeat.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, we had kind of planned out when this episode would take place, and looking at the schedule, we knew, and everybody's been talking about this, they have the little bit of a gauntlet again in the non-league schedule this year. They started with Mifflin, then they went to Springford. Obviously, both games that we'll get into later, but so looking at it from the outset, we were just like, okay, well, there's a real possibility again, obviously hoping and knowing that Wilson could win the Springford game, but also knowing that it was going to be a challenge because that was, that's a high-quality opponent.
Oh, absolutely. They've won, I believe, I forget how many consecutive division titles, much like Wilson. They've been in a couple district championship games. I believe they've won at least one. Former Wilson coach Brubaker has really turned that program around. They had been struggling.
I think they won 2 games the year before he went there.
Well, and they had won something. It was less than 10 total in the previous 5 years combined.
I thought it was somewhere between 5 and 8 in those 5 years. They were awful, and he really built the program.
Springford's won less than 7 or 8 games since Chad Brubaker's taken over for them. So he really has turned that program around and into a powerhouse in their league. And it looks to be the same this year because they're a strong team, as we saw Friday night. And we'll get to that game in a bit, but that's not the first game on the schedule that we have to cover because in week 1, Wilson hosted, as you mentioned, rival Governor Mifflin. So we're going to start there and talk about the first game of Wilson's season, which was against the Mustangs. And, I think it surprised few people how it went because, starting the game against a rival, people always say in those type of games you throw the record out. Well, everyone's record 0-0. You don't know what to expect. Mifflin runs an unique offense that for a young, inexperienced team or a team that doesn't see it that often is difficult to stop. The midline option, the veer, a form of wing tee. It's not the easiest for undisciplined or inexperienced teams to stop. So you never quite know what's going to happen in a game such as the Mifflin game that we see now for the last decade, I believe, the first game of the season. And we talked to the coaches this year and last year specifically, and they mentioned they wish it still was the last game of the year because then the team is ready, you know what you're getting, you have a lot more film on the opponent, And when it's a rivalry game such as that, that's the situation you want to be in, not one where you face them in the first week. But once Mifflin left for the Berks League, if you wanted to keep it going, it had to be non-league. And hey, first week of the season, Labor Day weekend, now it's a huge matchup in Berks County.
Yeah, and it's always kind of interesting now because you still have as more and more like colleges are starting later and some start like early. There's few that start like on Labor Day anymore. So you have some kids that actually are home from school already. You have some kids that haven't gone off to school yet. But at both Wilson and Mifflin, and a lot of people show up to the game. And I saw reports that it was one of the highest attended games at Wilson in a long time.
That's 5,000.
I had heard that, but then I heard a number that was closer to 7,000.
Okay, well, 5,000 to 7,000.
Right? Yeah. So I don't know. We don't have quite the access to that exact number. However, there were a ton of people there. It was packed well before the game, and the weather was perfect.
Yeah. It was a beautiful evening.
Yeah. So you couldn't really ask for more in terms of when you're going to be looking to get a good crowd out to the game. And from the Wilson standpoint, the game didn't really disappoint either.
No, absolutely not. And Wilson went on to win by a score of 38-7. And now, courtesy of Huddle and the Wilson coaching staff, we're going to check out the game recap here with some highlights from Wilson's dominating 38-7 victory over the visiting Mustangs. Now, things started off pretty good for Wilson. They were able to stop Mifflin. And then after a running into the kicker penalty, which changed Wilson's drive from a 4th and 11 to 4th and 6, junior quarterback Connor Yerg, who got the start, was able to hit Brian Wright on a almost nearly 40-yard touchdown to open up the scoring. Then on Mifflin's next series, Wilson picked off the pass, as you're seeing now on the screen, and they would continue to score throughout that. Wilson actually scored on their first 5 offensive possessions, and they would take a 31-0 halftime lead.
Yeah, when you looked at it, the way the game started off, Wilson got the ball. When Wilson got the ball on their first play, they just missed a play that would have been at a minimum a long gain.
Just off the fingertips of Fode Jello.
Right, possibly a touchdown. Hard to say that. Because it still was a long way from the end zone, but it would have been a big play. And you just start to think, oh man, is that a play that could come back to haunt you? At least early on in the game, in terms of not having the momentum, not seizing the momentum. And so then they got deep into the territory. They punted. And one thing not to overlook, and this was actually talked about, I think, in some of the articles written about the game, but they pinned them deep on that punt.
Yes, they did.
It was a great punt. I think it was at right around the 10-yard line. So a lot of people just said, we shut them down their first series.
Yep.
They went 3 and out. We got the ball. Just pin them back there. Let the defense do their thing. Declined the penalty, but they took it. And basically, Coach Thomas had given credit to the offensive staff and Coach Palm and others for convincing him to go for it.
Yep.
And that, obviously the offensive coaches probably always, I shouldn't say always, but if there's a chance, they want to go for it. And as the head coach has to make that call, though.
It worked in their favor.
They go, and not only did they get the first down, but as you saw, they were able to convert on the long pass. I believe that was to Brian Wright. But that was a great pass by Connor. And we talked, that was the end of the series where they started with the dropped pass,
right,
or the missed connection, I should say. It would have been a heck of a catch by Fode to start the game.
It would have been. It just went off his fingertips.
Right. It's not one that you're going to make every time, but it was just one where you're like, that would have been a great start.
They tried the same play against Springford and didn't quite connect. Once again, it was a beautiful thrown ball. Perfect placement, just a little too far. So they're going to hit on that one of these times. I don't know what game it's going to happen. Will it be against Central Dauphin or Warwick in the next 2 weeks? But it's a great play. Fode usually has a few steps on the defender. If they can just connect on that, it'll be a big play. But, yeah, there's not too much to say about the Mifflin game. It was utter domination by the Bulldogs. Mifflin they just didn't have it tonight. And I know they were able to rebound this week and beat Cocalico,
which is a big win for them.
That's a good win for them.
No joke. Yeah.
No, they went toe to toe with Redland, who beat Bishop McDevitt. In the week 0.
That's a big rebound game for them. So I think they have a lot of newer guys there. Trying to find their place. It wasn't a good matchup, and I think things got rolling in a negative direction for them in week 1, and it was just hard to stop that momentum once it got going.
Yeah, and Mifflin now gets to play Manheim Township in week 3.
That's an interesting game.
That's a nice barometer for the Bulldogs to kind of gauge. I know we talk about mathematical relationship where A beats B doesn't mean B beats C. It's not.
Right.
It can be like a circle where one team beats one team, but the next team beats another, and then they beat. And it's like, well, how does that work? Well, matchups are different. Sometimes it's difficult for one team to match up with one, but not the other. So while this obviously won't dictate what Wilson and Township will do near the end of the season, it'll be nice to see where they're at in relation to one another when the Streaks play the Mustangs in week 3.
Right, and knowing how we played, knowing how Mifflin defends things, seeing them play an opponent, we can start to try and figure out some stuff. So, yeah, like you mentioned, on multiple fronts, it could be a benefit in order to just be able to better prepare for that game later in the season.
All right, to close up and put a bow on the Mifflin game, we're going to talk a few stats here. First downs, Wilson had 19 to Governor Mifflin's 8. And a lot of the numbers you're going to hear from Mifflin are inflated because of what they were able to do at the very tail end of the third quarter and most of the fourth quarter.
In the first half, I think. It was right around there.
Well, up until the start of the fourth quarter, Mifflin's total yards, I think, was 75. Now, they ended the game with nearly 150. They almost doubled that, but half of them, maybe slightly more, was gained at the very end of the third or early fourth or throughout the fourth quarter against backups in the junior varsity. So Wilson's starting defense did their job this week, didn't surrender a point. Mifflin scored against the JVs. Wilson almost got the 200 rushing yards, ahead of 199. That's supposed to be Mifflin's bread and butter. They only had 136, and again, most of those came late in the second half when the game was in control by the Bulldogs.
Yeah, to put it in perspective, Wilson played 4 quarterbacks in week 1.
Yes, they did.
I kind of liked how they
Two of them by design.
Right. I kind of liked how they handled the really young quarterbacks. I say real young. I think they're a year younger than the starting quarterbacks. How they rotated them in by play, kind of just let them get
we saw
somewhat
Heckman
of a rhythm.
And Futrick were the softs that were able to play.
But I know that's minimal experience, but any chance you have to get those guys prepared. We talked in the preseason episodes about the experience that these guys get in some games like that. If you get a few snaps throughout the year, that's a few snaps ahead of where you'll be, hopefully, going into when it is your time.
Yeah, and the two quarterbacks that played for Wilson in the majority of the game, and by design, combined for 195 passing yards. Mifflin had just 13. They only attempted 6 passes. They completed 3, and they still threw 1 interception, which we talked about during the highlights. One key stat from the game, Wilson was 4 for 4 in the red zone, which is something, if they want to stay strong and be competitive all year, we're going to have to see them be, 80 plus as the season goes on. You need to score in those red zone opportunities. More importantly, you need to score touchdowns.
Right.
The guaranteed 6, 7, or 8, depending on the outcome of the extra point or the extra point play. You need those because settling for 3, it's points, you need to get those 6 every time.
Right.
And they did really well against Mifflin, going 4 for 4. Individual stats, it was the debut of Iggy Reynoso, the junior running back that moved into the district from Hamburg. He rushed 12 times for 118 yards and 1 score on the ground. He also chipped in the receiving game, but he could have had an even bigger stat line. But a 66-yard touchdown run was called back due to a penalty.
Right, yeah. I kind of, in my head, I keep getting that long touchdown run that was called back. To me, that's kind of like they used to talk about how Patrick Ewing used to block shots even if it was going to be goaltend. Like he would block the first 5 of the game regardless, just so it was in your head. And the way Iggy was running early in the game, just running kids over and then making other guys miss and all that stuff, even though it got called back, it kind of set the tone.
Right.
Because they didn't really let it set them back. They just kind of kept going. And I felt like even though it got called back, it was a good way to help keep that momentum going in the first half.
I said the Wilson starting quarterbacks combined for 195 passing yards. Connor York, I mentioned, got the start. He was 8 for 13 for 106 of those yards, tossing 2 touchdowns. Grayson Kline also played half the snaps. He was 6 for 8 for 89 yards, as well as 2 touchdowns. And on the receiving end were Brian White, Brian Wright, Alex Twyford, Justin Weller, and Leo Quigley. We had mentioned on the preview show that this was the 67th all-time meeting between Wilson and Governor Mifflin / Shillington many years ago. And with the victory, Wilson now leads the series 40-27. However, they've now won 29 of the last 37 meetings and the last 6 overall. The last Mifflin win was 5 years ago in overtime, September 2nd, 2011. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see the picture I have up. Wilson holding up the Gursky-Lynn Trophy and celebrating as a team again. Ever since this trophy came to be, Mifflin has not won against the Bulldogs.
And unlike the last few years, where there was the potential for a rematch late in the season, in the postseason actually, this year there is no potential rematch between Wilson and Mifflin because they are in different classifications. Again, a topic we touched on in the preseason episodes, but just something to keep in mind. Wilson and Mifflin will not play again this year.
Correct. They are 5A, so that was the final meeting for Wilson Mifflin until week 1 of 2017. All right, now the last piece of business before we talk to the players that we recorded interviews following the victory over the Mustangs is we need to hand out our first piece of hardware for the second season of the Bulldog Hour and for the 2016 season that the Wilson Football is currently playing. So week 1, a couple names came to mind immediately. You got to talk about the quarterbacks. They both played really well, and Jurg and Kline. Reynoso's debut, strong as well. Lots of standout on defense, and that's where we're going to go.
Yeah. When we talk about player of the game, this guy contributed all over the field, and our week 1 player of the game is going to be senior tight end and linebacker Leo Quigley, who had a receiving touchdown.
Yeah, he had 1 catch, 3 yards,
right.
And it was a
touchdown. I kind of joked.
touchdown.
There was a receiver behind him on that play.
I think it was Nick Johnson.
Who possibly would have caught the ball if Leo didn't get it, but there was no way Leo was going to let that get past him, and he leapt up and was able to make the catch. He had, by the stats, 8 total tackles, a tackle for a loss, and a sack, and he was everywhere on defense. We mentioned in the preseason episodes, again, a big loss this year, or I shouldn't say, well, it is a big loss, but an unknown was how is the linebacking core going to transition to not having multi-year starter
right.
Ike back there.
Yeah, Ike Schonauer, who's playing now defensive line up at Cortland State in New York. He was a 3-year starter and, heart and soul of that defense with a couple other guys each year. He was might have been the primary backup as a freshman, at least if not the first off the bench, the second. And he was, contributed a lot over the last 4 years. Him leaving, what was going to happen? Well, Leo Quigley certainly stepped up in the game against Mifflin, and his actions, both on offense and defense, earned him our first player of the game. So congratulations to Leo. All right, so before we recap spring forward, we're going to hear from some of the players we caught up with. Let's see, who was it after the Mifflin game? I know we talked to Leo Quigley and Isaiah Reigel.
Yep.
And then we also talked with defensive coordinator Ernie Wolber. So let's take a listen to both sets of interviews. All right, guys. Well, we're here with senior offensive tackle, defensive tackle Isaiah Reigel, and senior tight end linebacker Leo Quigley. Guys, well, that was an interesting start to the season, and in a positive way. Did you guys, in any capacity, envision that's the way this game was going to go?
Well, I thought it would be a lot tougher, but, we stuck to the game plan, executed, everybody did their job, so we came out with a positive outcome.
What was the biggest surprise of the game? Positively on you guys, maybe how they came out and played you. What was the biggest takeaway?
I'd say Grayson Kline ran over that kid.
You like that one?
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Yeah. You bring up Grayson Kline, one of 2 quarterbacks that played tonight, the other being Connor Jurg, both of them juniors. A lot of talk entering the year of who was going to grab the job, and it's interesting. A lot of times they say if you have 2 quarterbacks, you don't have one. Well, tonight both junior quarterbacks looked really well, splitting time, both threw a couple touchdowns, and both showed really good reads in the pocket as well as some scrambling ability. It must be nice to know that you can depend on both of them.
Yeah, definitely having 2 quarterbacks in the backfield, it's nice to know that no matter who we put back there, we're in good hands.
Now, was there a specific part of the game plan that had you really excited to get out there and see what you could do on the field?
our defensive part of the game plan, we always like to have a lot of fun on defense. Our big thing on defense is making a lot of noise and showing that we're about business. We always put a lot of stuff in there so we can all float the ball, all 11 hats on, whoever has the ball, and we're going to show them we mean business.
Now, you're both two-way starters, and Isaiah Reigel, most of the time, offensive line don't get a lot of credit. But, you open some big holes, especially for some outside runs by Ignacio Reynoso. He looked really good. Unfortunately, that one got called back, his big touchdown run. But defensively, you guys stopped. It's a difficult offense, especially for those that haven't played against it. Now, you both saw it, have seen it previously. But Leo, I remarked on Twitter in the first half, it was kind of you and the boys out there just flying around making plays. And it seemed like every other play, it was that Quigley with the tackle, Quigley with the tackle. Was there something specific coming into the game that they said, this is your game, you have to control this?
Well, Ike even had to fill his shoes, so I was kind of not really noticed when he was here, so it's just time to step up. Good job done.
We talked to both of you earlier in the summer, and a lot of you guys talked about how getting this W is always important. You want to win the first game, but when it's a big rivalry like this, did you talk about that before the game and the week leading up to it as well?
Yeah, we talked about how big the rivalry is, how it means to us, the whole trophy. With their coach going down, this game means even more to them. And we knew that we had to bring our A game against them because they were bringing theirs. We had to show them that we know business this year.
But getting that victory over Mifflin, the rivalry, is great, and you guys will graduate never losing to the Mustangs, which must feel good. But immediately I know Coach Doms and the staff is going to turn to next week. You have a big one back here at Gursky against Springford, and quite the stark opposite in terms of your defensive philosophy against their offense. Former Wilson coach Chad Brubaker will be bringing his crew here, and they're one of the favorites in their districts. It'll be an interesting game plan. I'm sure you guys are looking forward to films Sunday night.
Yeah.
Anything to say? Any shout-outs for anyone?
Shout out to my moms, my pops.
Yeah, definitely shout out to my parents, my family. All the juniors that definitely stepped it up to show that they can be part of this team.
And all my coaches.
Yeah.
Coaches
Definitely
before
the
high
coaching
school
staff.
football. Yeah,
Everyone who prepared us for getting us here now.
All right, awesome. Thank you guys, and great game.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks.
First thought after a big victory like that.
It's great to beat Mifflin always. We think about this game from the end of last season, the beginning of this season, and I was very worried coming in, extremely worried, but the kids played really well, and obviously we were very, very happy about the outcome.
Did Mifflin throw anything at your defense that you didn't expect, or was it pretty much what you've seen over the years and in the scrimmages?
Yeah, they didn't show us anything different than we've seen before. I thought they tried to throw the ball a little more earlier, which really surprised me. But no, they ran the ball at us, and our defensive line did a great job, and so it's kind of what we expected.
A lot was made in the paper, and I saw online about the number of two-way starters or players that Wilson had. 8 was thrown about, but we saw a healthy rotation both offensively and defensively. Were there a lot of younger players or first-year senior starters that stepped up over the summer or in the scrimmages that gave you that depth?
Yeah, somewhat. We're getting more confidence the more reps we get. The kids are coming more confident in what they're doing. They're playing harder. They're understanding. We had a pretty complex game plan tonight, more than we've usually done against Mifflin. We changed a lot of things. But they're getting better week in and week out, and we're getting more confidence. And those two-way players we want to get breaks to. There's some big guys going both ways too, and we want to get them out. So they're doing a nice job, and they're getting better at practice, and we're hopefully going to work to more a two-platoon system. So we're trying to get to that point.
Now, if I'm familiar at all with what's coming next week, it's kind of a huge 180 from what you faced against Mifflin with the midline, veer, whatever kind of option you want to dictate that the Mustangs run. But now you got to welcome in the Springford Rams next Friday at Gursky. How difficult is it to go from a team that runs the ball? I mean, we saw last year 81% of their yards came on the ground versus a team like Springford with a former Wilson coach that kind of likes to use the spread air raid style. Is that a tough change of pace for your defense for game planning?
Absolutely. It was nice seeing Parkland, who was spread, but now a little more traditional. Boone last week was spread. You work in 7-7s all summer against spreads, but not a lot of team concept stuff, more secondary stuff. So we do expect a big change in us, and you'll see a big change in our defensive. We won't have the big guys out there as much. We're going to get more speed, athleticism going, so we can try to match their speed next week.
All right. Anything to say to Wilson football community or anyone at home?
We beat the Mustangs, and that's all important right now. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Coach. All All right, well, you just heard from senior offensive tackle and defensive tackle Isaiah Reigel, was also joined by senior tight end and linebacker Leo Quigley, our player of the game for Mifflin, and also defensive coordinator Ernie Wolber. So we thank all those guys for meeting us after the game, after their victory, their resounding victory over the Governor Mifflin Mustangs to start the season 1-0 and get things started on the right foot. So we're going to move on now to week 2, which just wrapped Friday night, again at Gursky, 2 straight home games for the Bulldogs. They're looking to go to 2-0, and it was an interesting game just because, as we mentioned in our preview a couple weeks back, this is the first time that Wilson's ever met Springford in the regular season as the Springford district. They played both teams in the 40s and 50s that merged to become Springford, but never actually played the Golden Rams in the regular season up until Friday night at Gursky. It was a wild one. Unfortunately, Justin, you weren't there to see it.
I was not.
But
I had a prior commitment.
You were following our highlights.
Yeah, but almost a year in the making. But I was following along, yes.
Yeah, and it was a crazy game, and I'm sure a lot of you, probably all of you that are listening to this, know what happened in the game. But I'll pull it up anyways. So once again, on September 9th, the Springford Rams traveled to Gursky Stadium to play our Wilson Bulldogs. And, well, eventually, finally, I think over 3.5 hours or close to 3.5 hours of game time, the Bulldogs emerged victorious in double overtime, beating Springford 41-40. And former Wilson coach Chad Brubaker, the head coach at Springford, decided in the end of the second overtime that let's not go to a third, let's end this now. He chose to go for 2. And as we'll see here in the highlights shortly, it was unsuccessful. Yeah. Not by much.
No.
It was very, very close. But
easy for me to say on this side of it. I think it was a good decision. That's a tough decision that the coach will have to live with. But if he gets it, everybody says, "Oh, he's a genius. He went for it. His guys were gassed. Just go to end it now." If he doesn't, I actually think in this case, a lot of people are like, "Okay, I get it." Like it was a really hot night.
I haven't heard any negative things.
No,
now, we're on the Wilson side of things,
exactly. So I'm sure there are some people who are like, "Oh, we scored on 2 plays in 2 overtimes. Why wouldn't we, just keep going?" But at the same time, your guys. You're on the sideline. If they're gassed, you don't want to run the risk of being on the short end of it. You have a chance. Basically, you have to go 3 yards on 1 play. And you just, on your last 2 offensive plays, you got 10 yards on each of them. So let's do it. Let's go for it. Now, so I agree with the decision. It's easy for me to say that, though, because I'm on the other side.
I am not a high school football rule book genius. But I know in college, once I believe you get into third overtime, they require you to make try the 2-point play, attempt the 2-point conversion. I thought high school was like that too. So if he didn't do it then by choice, both teams were going to be forced to do it should they score a touchdown in overtime 3 and onward. Now we saw in the District 3 championship game last year, I believe it was 6 or 7 overtimes between Central Dauphin and Cumberland Valley. Right. Now this one went to 2 and ended in the Bulldogs' favor, thankfully. But let's take a look at some of the highlights here. Now we're just going to run through some plays if I can find them. Unfortunately, don't have this stitched together like the previous one, which was quite nice, I must say. So let's see if I can find anything to show you on the replay, because watching just the plays not very fun. So let's try this one here. Alrighty. I don't think that caught. There were some issues with the camera, so we may be having issues here as well, which doesn't look like this is playing at all now, so that's wonderful. But so Springford actually jumped out to a 14-point lead on the Bulldogs. They scored the first 2 touchdowns. They drove down the field methodically the first time. The second time, I believe their drive was kept alive on a penalty. Now what you're seeing there is actually the Wilson's second touchdown. That one was to Brian Wright, who scored a touchdown obviously the week before. And now here's a guy who became part of a kind of a cult hero after this game was Wilson kicker Nick Borelli, and he was the guy who sent the game to overtime, and then his extra point actually ended up winning the game when Springford decided to go for 2. So the Bulldogs started a little weak. I don't know if Springford caught them off guard or what exactly happened, that they were having some difficulties containing the spread offense that Springford was running. But they marched down the field and capitalized both times, 14-0 lead. Now Wilson stormed back, and as you just saw on the Brian Wright touchdown, they tied it 14-14. And Wilson actually took the lead and went up 21-14. Let's see if this will play through here for you. You can see Wilson taking the 21-14 lead. But then things went a little south. Third quarter was a little rough for Wilson. Springford went on top 24-21, and the film not great from this game, unfortunately. Things not together here. But Wilson on a punt got stopped at the 1. Next play, safety, kicked it to them, and next thing you know, they score and get the 2-point conversion. Now, what you just saw there was the touchdown to Fode Jalot to put Wilson up 21-14. And as I mentioned, safety in the third quarter, after the free kick, a touchdown just a few plays later, good 2-point conversion. All of a sudden, Wilson goes from being up 21-14 to being down 24-21. And here, if you're watching, you can see the third Bulldogs touchdown, if it doesn't freeze. Definitely seem to be having some issues with the film here. I don't really know if the issues were like this were live or what. But now I'm clicking in the wrong spot and everything. So we're gonna have to ditch the highlights because it seems like the film is giving us a bit of an issue. So the victory over the Rams, it was thrilling for sure. The 1-point win, 41-40, but there's going to be a lot to correct leading into the Central Dauphin game. Obviously, giving up 40 points isn't ideal, but saw the offense able to hang with them, put up some scores. Probably the biggest thing that definitely needs to be corrected. They were okay in the red zone. The Bulldogs were had some issues. In the third quarter, primarily, is where things kind of fell apart for them. I believe they scored on 3 of 4 red zone opportunities, but in the third quarter, they just couldn't capitalize on mistakes by Springford, and then they made a few of their own in the safety. But Wilson recovered a fumble, didn't get any points. Wilson fumbled the ball, gave the ball back, and throughout the game, the Bulldogs were only 1 for 11 on third down. Now, they were able to recover a little bit because they went 4 for 6 on fourth, but you don't want to be in that situation. You want to convert more on third down and not have to rely on fourth down. But overall, team stats, Wilson actually had the advantage in first downs, 22-19. They rushed for over 100 yards, but Springford rushed for almost 200 yards. Passing-wise, though, Wilson threw for 356 as a team compared to just 124 for the Rams. So total yardage, Wilson outgained Springford 474 to 323. Reynoso, another key player once again, both on the ground and through the air. He rushed 12 times for only 25 yards, did get one score, but in the receiving game, he caught 2 balls for 53 yards and a touchdown. Most of the time, the offensive attack was coming from Connor Jurg. He rushed 17 times for 83 yards and a score, but he also threw the ball 27 times, completing 16 of them for 271 yards and 3 touchdowns. Now, they did put in Grayson Kline sporadically, but Connor Jurg was kind of running the show through most of the game and into the fourth quarter. Now, near the end of the fourth quarter, though, he got injured. I believe a foot injury. I don't know the status of him at this moment. So then it became Grayson Kline's ball game to run the 2-minute offense at the end of the game to drive to either take the lead or tie the game. The Bulldog offense had to go 80 yards in 90 seconds. Kline was great throughout the entire game. He was 8 for 14, 85 yards, and he had a rushing score, which happened in overtime. Now, the leading receiver was Alex Twyford. He had 98 yards receiving, and we saw Fode and Brian Wright have receiving touchdowns. But a 2-minute drill worked to perfection. 90 seconds, 80 yards, and they did it. And
especially there was a moment towards the end, the second to last play of regulation, where Grayson is scrambling. And for those who aren't familiar with the orientation of the field and everything like that, he's running away from the scoreboard towards the end zone, like away from the school. And so as he's doing that, he can't see the time, and time is winding down as he's scrambling. If he doesn't get out of bounds, or if he gets out of bounds after the clock hits 0, obviously the game is over.
Yeah.
So he got out of bounds with just a couple seconds left, which let the field goal team was ready to run on. They were able to run on and kick that field goal at the end of regulation.
Yeah, so he went out of bounds with 2 seconds to go, and it was right at the 10-yard line. So with 2 seconds to play, Wilson special teams field goal unit lined up, and kicker Nick Borelli trotted out there. He had made a field goal from 26 earlier. Now this was on the wide hash, so not a direct kick, and he had also already made 3 extra points. And ball snapped, clock winds down, last play of the game, and he nails it. And Wilson ties it 27-27, kind of unbelievably. They had been outplayed for most of the second half, but then Grayson Kline led the 2-minute drill to perfection, got Borelli in the situation, and he kicked it through. Wilson, Springford going to overtime. This was the 6 ABC Huddle High School Game of the Week, thanks to votes from the community.
And they actually mentioned how many votes.
Yeah,
on the
like 32,000 or something like that.
Yeah, they were shocked at how many votes there were. So that's incredible.
We were putting it out there on all our pages to make sure people voted, and for a while we were up by a couple hundred. Then all of a sudden we were down by like 4,000, and then next thing I know we're up by like 17,000. I was like, what is going on? It was absolutely nuts. I have no idea how exactly they were calculating them, but whatever. We were able to be the game of the week, and they were there, and they have highlights up on their site at 6abc.com. So does Lancaster Lebanon League sports videos, and the Big Tech at WFMZ Channel 69 News. So you can see all that kind of stuff, highlights from that game, which we're having trouble with here. But, yeah, well, I mean, what a game. The first meeting between schools in the regular season, and it definitely didn't disappoint. Now, in the overtime period, Wilson, I believe, won the toss, and they chose to go on defense towards the student section, which thankfully was the end zone that I was already standing in, so I didn't have to go anywhere. And we heard on the first play, Springford scored passing touchdown.
Yeah.
So immediately they go up. They exploit's good. They go up 7, and now you're Wilson. Now you have to get a touchdown.
4 downs, you got to score.
Yep. And they did it, I believe, on the second play. I think the first play was a Tommy O'Brien run up the gut, and he got like 8.5 yards, something like that. And or maybe that was overtime too. Now everything's running together. I'm having a tough time remembering. The first overtime actually might have been a passing touchdown. I honestly can't remember. No, it was Iggy. It was Iggy's run. The passing touchdowns were in regulation. Iggy Reynoso powered in on the second or third play of the first overtime. Kick was good. We're going to second overtime. Now they flip-flop it, and Wilson has to go first. End zone stayed there. They decided to stay at the student section end zone away from the scoreboard. And first play, I think, was the Tommy O'Brien run. Set it up for Grayson Kline to dive in. A good second effort from him to reach the ball with the goal line. Borelli extra point, good. Now you're up 41-34. Springford trots out. First play, toss, touchdown. And that's when the drama really escalated.
I believe they called a timeout immediately.
Yeah, they did.
Or virtually immediately, which then everyone knew. They're not calling a timeout to run the kick team out there.
No.
They're going
They're
for
debating
it.
whether
The game is going to end here, either for Wilson or for Springford coming out on top. The game's going to end.
And like we had mentioned, the previous 2 offensive plays for Springford gained 10 yards each time and were a touchdown. So now you got it on the 3. You only need 3 yards for victory. They got to be feeling pretty good. And well, it didn't work out for them. And I'm actually I'm going to see if I can pull up the video because I definitely want to see that. So while I try to do that, why don't we talk about this week's Player of the Week for Week 2? There were a couple great performances again. The week 1 player of the game in Leo Quigley had another 8 tackles, 1.5 of them for loss, including a sack. The quarterbacks again, Jurgen Kline, great games. Twyford also, almost 100 yards receiving. He was really dominant for us on offense. But Justin, who's our player of the game for week 2?
All right, so our player of the week for week 2, we're going a little bit off the norm here, is going to be senior kicker Nick Borelli. Nick was 5 for 5 on extra points. He hit 2 field goals, including the game-tying field goal with no time remaining from 27 yards out. And then he also had a special teams tackle.
Yeah, he actually had a special teams tackle that may have saved a touchdown on a return.
So when you think about this, 5 extra points, the 2 field goals, that's 11 points right there in a 1-point game, in a 1-point win. There were lots of guys that contributed here. Nick has been kicking on the team for a few years, but he was behind Nick Hart last year, who graduated. It's his first real opportunity to get the big kicks and to be able to be part of not just him, but the whole special teams unit that was ready, ran out. There was no timeout to set up the game-tying kick, but he had the game-tying kick, and then he had essentially the game-winning kick, even though the defense had to come up with a stop afterwards. So when you look at this, it's one of those things that we'll just have to kind of give Nick his credit there. He came up big when it mattered, and those points were huge in that 1-point victory.
Yes, for sure. Now, I think I have the last few plays here. I hope this is the right one. We're going to show it up. But congratulations to senior kicker Nick Borelli for being the player of the game for the Week 2 victory over Springford. Now, let's see if these are the right plays. Okay, so the highlights are not working properly on Huddle. That's unfortunate because it was I know that we have the video from it because I've seen it floating around on Twitter. And one of the players that helped to make the stop on the play, which prevented I believe it actually might have been a Wildcat play where it was either a very quick handoff possibly to the Springford running back, took it up the middle from 3, and he got to about the half-inch line maybe.
Yeah.
And the first guy to make contact was senior safety Tommy O'Brien was the first one to take him. Now, he started to dive towards the end zone, came up to right around that half-inch line when another player grabbed him by the shoulders and yanked him away from the goal line to seal victory. And they, Springford players actually started celebrating because they thought they had scored. Wilson players were standing, shaking their arms back and forth saying no. And I glanced over at the one judge standing along the end zone line, and when he starts waving his hands across his body saying no point, the Wilson sideline erupted with their hands in the air, helmets raised, flying on the field, celebrating the victory. And as the nearly 3.5-hour game finally came to a close with Wilson on top 41-40. It was just unbelievable. And after 2 years ago, we had that crazy finish against Governor Mifflin with Wilson storming back in the fourth quarter and winning in the first overtime 35-34. It's just crazy events at Gursky twice in the last 2 years.
Right. It is kind of crazy how it came down to, in the articles in the newspapers and everything, we're talking about this, the cliche, it's a game of inches, but it was. The game was decided by a few inches at the end, and the defense, all the time they preach swarm to the ball, don't just watch, and it's not just one guy, because if it comes up to one guy, you could have ended up in the situation like when Wilson was on offense, where Grayson runs into the pile, but then the second effort he was able to reach over and put the ball in the end zone.
Yeah, and I wish I knew. I can't off the top of my head remember who it was that helped Tommy stop him. Tommy made the initial contact and pretty much stopped him cold. He reached out, was a little short, and then someone was like, "You're not getting a second chance." And right. I do not remember who that was. But great effort. They didn't give up. They were down 14 early. They gave up the lead, and were down by 3 late in the game. They were able to tie it, come back again from down 3, and force overtime. And anything can happen once you get there. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can see some of my pictures here, catching the moment where the refs said no 2-point play with the sidelines running onto the field. And then Coach Doms wants to once the team and coaches got to midfield, raising his hands, putting his fingers close together, signifying, that cliche that Justin just mentioned, game of inches, and they were this close to losing. And now they are, celebrate briefly 2-0, but starting today, Sunday, get back out there, get ready for Central Dauphin, which is the matchup for Week 3. So up next, we're going to listen to the players that I caught up with after the victory over Springford. We talked to a bunch of them. Most importantly, our player of the game, Nick Borelli. Then also grabbed wide receivers and defenders, Mason McElroy and Brian Wright. And finally, we got to talk with the quarterback at the end of the game and in overtime, Grayson Kline. So check out these interviews from the players following the victory over Springford.
All right, we're here post-game after Wilson's double overtime victory over the Springford Rams. With me now is senior kicker Borelli, who had himself quite a game, especially after the Bulldogs offense was able to drive down the field 80 yards in 90 seconds. They set him up with 2 seconds to go, and as time expired, you hit the game-time field goal to send the game to overtime. What was going through your head at that moment?
There was a lot going through my head. It was just trying to stay relaxed, trying to take some deep breaths as soon as I'm taking my steps. That's pretty much it.
Now, you've never been under the pressure quite like that in the game situation before. Was there anything going on different, or you just, you did what you were taught by Coach Gibble?
I was pretty confident going in, even though it's a new situation. I feel like I have a great group of guys in front of me, snapping, blocking, holding. I had to do it for them, and also the guys who drove the ball 80 yards down the field for me.
And then in overtime, you attempted 2 extra points and made them both. Same thing, just going through your steps, making them count.
Yeah, just trying not to pull a Jan Johnson result.
All right, well, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right, now joining me, we got senior Mason McElroy and senior Brian Wright. Guys, what an incredible game. Both of you played a huge role in it. Brian, another touchdown. Mason, interception. What were your thoughts at the beginning of the game when you went down 14?
I think we took them a little lightly, but when you're down 14, you just got to show out. That's what we did tonight.
Brian, how did your touchdown get set up? What were you thinking going into that play? Were you thinking the ball was coming your way?
Absolutely, because on that side it was short side, so they were just like throw it to me because it was a mismatch, and they threw it. I caught it.
Mason, a couple kick and punt return opportunities. Looks like you had some seams a couple times and then just get tripped up. Was there anything you saw in the game plan, not just on special teams, but offense or defense, that you thought you could take advantage of?
Definitely, we work on a lot of curl routes, and if you're man-to-man against our wide receiver core, I don't think anyone can guard that one-on-one on a curl route, so definitely that, and just good route running pretty much.
Now, both of you were involved in a crazy game 2 years ago as sophomores. A little bit different situation when you're starters and seniors, but that game against Mifflin to open the season 2 years ago, and now this one, where does this one compare, or how does this one compare to that Mifflin game, and is this now your favorite game of your career?
Well, in these type of situations, we prepare for this, we condition, and we knew that they were tired, so we just pushed the ball up on them.
Well, yeah, I mean, as sophomores, you don't get that much time unless you're like excellent. So this has definitely got to be the best game as a team I think I've witnessed.
Now you got a tough one next week, Central Dauphin. They clipped you by 1 here last year. Now you get to go there, where again, as sophomores 2 years ago, you were able to beat them. It's a tough matchup and huge ramifications for District 3. And you guys got anything to say in the week leading up to the other Ram team?
Bulldog Pride. Bulldog Pride. New
All
year, new team.
All right, thanks, guys. All right, in the last interview tonight, after Wilson's victory over the Springford Rams in double overtime, 41-40, the man who came in and led the team in the end of the fourth quarter and throughout overtime had some big plays, including setting up the game-tying field goal at the end of the fourth. What was going through your mind on that play? When I assume it was a called pass and things just broke down. Kind of take us through what was going through your mind before the snap and then during the play.
Well, I dropped back, looked at all my options. Everything kind of broke down and came flying free. And I just thought, gotta beat him, gotta beat him, gotta beat him. Looked up at the clock, had a little over 10 seconds left before the play started. Once I got past him, realized get as close as I can and get out of bounds.
Well, we were wondering about that awareness. I'm glad you were watching the clock, because as you were running, we were thinking, is he going to try to get in the end zone, or is he going to step out? And then you went out. You set it up, and Nick Borelli, he hit it home, sent it to overtime. Then you guys got your back to the wall immediately as Springford scored on the first play. Did you do anything on the sidelines or in the huddle walking out when you knew you needed a touchdown and the extra point to send it to double overtime?
I just said, guys, let's go. We got to get in the end zone. Borelli will take care of it once we get there. Let's do our part. Let's let him do his, and we'll be just fine.
Now, you've been with the team a little longer than the other guys we talked about coming up as a freshman, so you've played a few more games than them, but where does this one rank in your games as a Bulldog so far?
This is pretty close to the top. Never had to be in a situation like this before. Never thought I'd get my number called for a run play to win a game, but played the cards I was dealt, and it all worked out great. So this has to be up towards the top.
Now the game ended with Wilson on defense, and they needed to prevent Springford from converting on a 2-point play. It wasn't required by the rules, but Coach Brubaker and Springford decided they wanted to end this game now. They looked like it was extremely close, mere inches. What were you thinking, or what were you doing on the sideline when you realized that you had just won the game?
I was kneeling down praying to God. They were running the ball right up the gut the whole game, and I just figured we needed help, and it paid off. We got it. Oh my God. I don't know how we got it. I saw Foe run that way and their team dropped. so I'm so thankful for all that.
Now you're at 2-0, got a huge District 3 game at Central Dauphin next week. Like I said previously, they got the best of you last year by a point. It's time to return the favor, going there to play. What's it going to be like this week in practice leading up to a huge showdown like that?
I think there's definitely going to be a lot of emotion. There's a lot on this game. They're a powerhouse, we're a powerhouse, and I think after last year we just got to play a little chip on our shoulder. I think we'll be ready to go.
Anything else to add? Any shout-outs from you, Grayson?
Thank you, offensive line. Thank you, offensive line. Means a lot, guys.
Got to respect the man that knows who's protecting him. All right, thanks, Grayson.
Thank you.
Now we're going to move on very quickly to preview weeks 3 and 4, and as we've mentioned multiple times already, week 3 is a big one. First road game for Wilson. They are heading to Speed Ebersol Stadium in Harrisburg to play the Central Dauphin Rams. We know last year they came to Gursky and left with a 1-point victory, 20-19. 2 years ago, the first time this series, regular season series began, the 2014 team went to Central Dauphin and came away from that with, I believe, a 3-point victory. And we all know the 2014 season was a very, very good one. Now coming back there 2 years later to play the Rams team, who once again, despite some losses to graduation, have an incredibly strong team. They're actually coming off of back-to-back random but 31-9 victories in both their games. They destroyed Manheim Township, winning convincingly on actually the first Thursday game because of scheduling contradictions. They share the field with CD East as well, and both teams had home games back-to-back weeks. So one played Thursday. Next week they played Friday and vice versa. So the Rams beat the Streaks 31-9. Then this week, playing on Friday, the Rams hosted Susquehanna Township and beat them 31-9. This is going to be the 8th meeting between the teams. Central Dauphin got the best of us last year. We got to return the favor and take it to them in 2014, actually twice. Beating them by 3 at their place, and then beating them in the district title game a little bit more convincingly, but a great game at Hershey. So this should be another battle. You got to be ready to go, ready to play. There's some people beat up. We know senior inside linebacker Elliot Bob didn't play this past week. He told me he is expected to play against Central Dauphin. And we'll see what happens. The Rams like to run on the ground now. They have experience at quarterback because the guy that was a sophomore 2 years ago, now a senior, and in his 3rd year as a starter. I believe they lost all of their wide receivers and secondary members, but they're a talented team just like Wilson. We don't to have down years. We just kind of next man up philosophy. Central Dauphin's just like that. So they've got guys ready to step in those roles, and obviously they have 5-star defensive end Micah Parsons, who's currently committed to Penn State. and is just a terror off the edge and wherever they use him on defense. And supposedly, I haven't seen it happen yet or heard if it's happened, but supposedly he's supposed to be playing some offense, and it wouldn't surprise me if that would debut against the Bulldogs this Friday.
The most talented player on the field. There's no real debate over that. And so it would be no surprise if they start to try and find ways to roll that out. And it wouldn't surprise me if they haven't used it a whole lot, if they start to use it this week, things like that. You never know what to expect in these big games. It'll be a big matchup. Again, a really tough matchup for Wilson going to Central Dauphin this Friday.
Yeah, and they have a crew that covers all their game radio-wise, so if you can't head out to Speed Ebersol Stadium, you'll be able to listen to their broadcasts. And last year we got to meet one of their commentators, and he's already reached out to us that they want to meet up with us again this year. So two great District 3 teams, an early season meeting, and really this could end up deciding who gets the 1 seed. Cumberland Valley's still hanging out there, but Central Dauphin has to play Cumberland Valley.
Right.
Wilson doesn't get to until at least the playoffs. So Wilson beats Dauphin here, or vice versa. That team's set up to probably be the number 1 seed once playoffs come around, unless something happens in league play.
Right.
Which the Bulldogs will actually start the next week in week 4, also on the road. And now with the changing in division alignment or PIAA classifications, the LL schedule has gotten jumbled a little bit, and now the team that Wilson had been finishing the season with is now their first league game, and that is the Warwick Warriors. Over the last few years, not very competitive, at least last year. They've given the Bulldogs trouble on the road, which is where Wilson will be traveling to Warwick this year. But a pretty experienced team returning a lot of starters. If you recall back to our preview episode, Warwick has possibly even double digits on one side of the ball in returning players. They've got an experienced quarterback. They have some big linemen. And they've been, they got beat up a little bit by Manheim Central in the first week. They lost 38-17, but in the second week, they scored 52 on Garden Spot. Now, Garden Spot in week 1, well, the actual week 1, not week 0, the real week 1, Garden Spot beat Y Missing to send them to 0-2.
Right. So Garden Spot is also returning a ton of players this year, I believe, in LL Section 2, I believe.
I think you're right.
And so, Garden Spot, not one of the bigger schools, but has definitely, isn't a school to overlook this year. So Warwick, you mentioned it, and we talked about this in the preseason show as well. A few years ago, Hempfield had a bunch of young guys who got, for various reasons, got a lot of time early, and that was kind of the group that came to fruition the last couple of years, and Hempfield did really well.
And back-to-back years, I think they lost to Central Dauphin in overtime.
Right.
And in the district playoffs.
Warwick, I believe it was last year, for all kinds of circumstances, had some guys.
I actually think it was 2 years ago.
Okay.
I mean, the kids that are seniors now were softs then.
Yeah, it all kind of runs together, like you said, but got a lot of playing time. So, rough year last year still, but that extra experience starts to pay off, and they're already ahead of where they've been in years past. I would say with some of their losing to Manheim Central is not really a knock on anyone. No. Like they're a perennial power. So it'll be pretty awesome.
Yeah, the biggest part of the preview I think would say you can obviously see that Warwick can put up points, scoring 52. And even 17 against Central. Now, I don't know if any of those came late against their backups, but, right there, that's 69 points in the first 2 weeks of the season.
Not something we're used to seeing from them in the years past, so you can tell things are changing.
Yeah. However, you also can tell that defensively, they still seem to be a little suspect, giving up 73 points in 2 weeks. So, if Wilson wants to start off the league schedule right and continue those streaks we talked about on the previous show, they're going to have to beat a Warwick team that's going to be out. They haven't beaten Wilson in probably close to 10 years. And, they've controlled Wilson at Warwick in 2012 and 2014, sending it to a second-half decision. Hopefully Wilson will come out ready to go in 2 weeks when they play at Warwick to begin the 2016 Lancaster-Lebanon League Section 1 schedule. Okay. So now this is the end of our third episode of Season 2. We just want to remind everyone to make sure you like both Wilson Bulldogs Football and the Bulldog Hour fan pages on Facebook, and also follow our accounts on Twitter at Wilson Bulldogs and at Bulldog Hour. A lot of you have seemed to be enjoying that we've been doing post-game interviews. We said we would do that after the wins at least.
I was going to say, it's something you can get after the wins. We're not about to step in there and try and do that after losses.
Right. So you saw the interviews with some players and Coach Wolber following the Mifflin win. We also had the interviews with a bunch of players after the crazy win over Springford, and we'll continue to do so. If they win, we'll be at the game at Central Dauphin and at Warwick. Wilson comes out on top of those, and we'll make sure we grab some of the star players and perhaps some of the coaches as well to talk about what went right for Wilson that night. And obviously, if you follow at Wilson Bulldogs on Twitter, I continue to put up live game updates and photos throughout the evening. You can also find both the football team and the Bulldog Hour show on Instagram. Anything Wilson football related, you can find. Just look at Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and on the web pages. Hopefully, we're going to have a trivia contest or some kind of giveaway in the coming shows. And I think that's about does it. The only thing we want to say is a thank you to our sponsor, which is May's Sandwich Shop, for continuing to help us and support the show. There's many ways that you can do that. Go to bulldoghour.com to find out how. And also a special shout out. They want to remain anonymous, but we thank them for their financial support of the show and for us to continue to do this. And we really appreciate their contribution to the Bulldog Hour once again this year. Like I said, we're always accepting donations, and you can find all that information at bulldoghour.com. Anything else from you, Justin?
No, it's been a great start to the season. The teams, it was very different matchups in the first 2 weeks, and it'll kind of be a different matchup this week coming up. It's tough in terms of common opponents. We don't really share a whole lot with Springford. Actually, we probably don't share any.
I don't think any others.
But
no.
Just because they play in that eastern part and they play a lot of Suburban 1, District 1 schools and everything like that, whereas we're going to play mostly District 3, well, virtually all District 3 schools, I guess all from here on out. So, but Central Dauphin is, again, it's almost like we're progressing here, and that's not a knock on Springford. They're a great program, but Central Dauphin, has won a state title in the last few years, and
5 years ago.
Right, yeah. So, they're just a perennial power in our district, and so you know what you're going to get when you go there. So it's going to be interesting to kind of see how that plays out moving forward. It's a big game this week on the road, first road game, and, have to improve each week. And that's, regardless, but this week, if you don't, you won't get the outcome you want.
For sure. So we hope you enjoyed this episode of the Bulldog Hour. For Justin Raffauf and the Wilson Football Program, I'm Joe Mays. And remember,
go Bulldogs.
Go Bulldogs.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Bulldog Hour. Want more Wilson football? Follow the show on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes and SoundCloud. Or visit www.bulldoghour.com. The Bulldog Hour is a featured program on jmnjrradio.com.